Okay, so it's all good now. I'm gonna make you the host now, and please make me the co-host after this. Okay,
Sure, Phil.
perfect. Is this your first class today?
Yes, it is.
It's gonna be a long day for you.
Well, it's Pacific time, so it starts 10. I've got two more scheduled, yes. But I've had four in one day. That gets busy. Actually, what gets
Mm,
busier is when I have larger classes, the medium-sized classes that with about 10, to 15 people are it's a little bit easier to manage, but when you get a larger class, it becomes challenging because you get so many different skill levels.
right, right. How many are you expecting today?
There were, I think, 24 or 26 registered, so I'm not sure what the participation rate will be, but we'll see.
That's still a lot.
Yeah, I think I get a lot. I mean, I have a smaller class today on exploring and finding apps on the iPhone App Store with about 8 or 9 people registered. But yeah, I usually for this web browsers, my Zoom virtual backgrounds class, Microsoft 365. Those are all classes that usually get 20 or more people in them.
Right.
Yeah. So that's okay. I mean, it gets a little challenging to manage, but it's mostly because we get so many different skill levels in those classes.
Right, right. I think so. Some of them would probably have ideas about the topic, but most of them don't. So it is difficult actually to conduct a class with different level of learners, right?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges of adult education, teaching adults that are, it's one thing when you're teaching a college class and you've got, say, algebra one, and then you've got algebra two and algebra three, right? If people passed algebra one, they should be able to get into algebra two,
Right.
etc. So, would you do me a favor, Phil, and manage the waiting room for me?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That helps out quite a bit.
Right. There are people now, so I'm gonna admit all
Go
of
ahead
them.
and let them in. Great, great. Thank you.
Well,
Welcome, everyone, to All About Web Browsers. Well, the class is about web browsers. I don't know if we'll get to all about web browsers, but we'll probably, but if you name the class something about web browsers, it might not sound as appealing, right? But we're going to learn a little bit about web browsers today. And I'm just curious. What the reason we put this class together? Wade Yarborough. Anybody taking classes from Wade on Get Set Up? Okay. He and I were talking about how sometimes in our classes on technology, it's some people were asking questions about what the difference is between a web browser and a search engine and why they're different. And so hopefully we will help you understand that by the time you're done today. This is an understanding class more than a how to use things class, but we're looking at putting together some classes on how to do things. I've got a little poll for you to take. It's anonymous, we aren't going to track your name, but at some point I'd like to get some feedback from you. It'd be a good break for us to take. Okay, so I'm going to get started with some slides here for those of you that came in on time. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And We're going to talk about all about web browsers today. Let me make sure my mouse is clicking and advancing okay. You know, technology usually works. I'm Bob Cohen. I'm in Seal Beach, California, which is in the Los Angeles metro area. Was born in Chicago. My dad was a school teacher, and when I was a kid, we would take Route 66 to California to visit my grandmother. And I said, I want to move to California. So I came out here, went to college, and worked in the tech industry, owned my own internet service company, started doing a training company, training adults in technology around 2007, and I've been doing that since then. And I hope to make technology and a few other things a little bit easier to understand. At Get Set Up, we're a learning organization. Phil from Get Set Up is my teaching assistant for class. So if you want to wave and say hi to Phil, he's in the gallery and he's watching my chat for me and just checking to see if anybody has any questions or technical issues or difficulties. And occasionally, if we mention a class, we might be able to post a link to it in chat as well. For those of you, you can request a recording after class. Let me thank you, Phil, for starting recording. Appreciate that. And if you're joining by live stream, welcome. For those of you on live streaming services, we encourage you to go to getsetup.io, set up a free account, join us and register for class. And even though we might mention some products, we're not paid to promote anything specific. So we're just providing information as part of our learning activity. So let me get an idea. Let me tell you a little about the agenda, and then we'll have a little discussion about the things that might be confusing about web browsers and some tools and tips that you can use, no matter what web browser you use, because they're made by a couple of different organizations. So we're going to talk about what are web browsers and making sure we understand what a web browser is. We'll talk about some common features and why there are some things that are common across web browsers. So you have an understanding of the technology. I kind of find when people understand what's going on with technology, it makes it easier for them to make choices. And there are some differences, but they're actually surprisingly few. But we'll talk about why one browser or another one might be better for you. Okay. And they'll all do a good job for you. So we'll talk about that. So let me stop sharing here so I can see you all in our gallery here view and see if there's any questions. And I'm going to use an older technology called a pen and a paper to write down any questions. You know, some things still work even though they're older styles. So I'm curious if anybody had any experience with web browsers or questions they have about web browsing and in general, and we'll see if we can bring them into the session or not. Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Hi, Bob. This is Jean. Hello, everyone. I keep seeing and hearing people, even in the tech field, use the term, quote, web browser and search engine interchangeably. And the way I learned this is that they're not the same thing. So perhaps in our discussion today, you might bring out the differences between those two.
You are absolutely correct. They are not the same thing. And we're going to talk about that. That's one of the major things we want to cover today. Thank you, Jean-Ann.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have any comments, questions about web browsers or, search engines or, technology that they're hoping to get a little clearer today based on the topic we talked about? Okay. All right, well, we'll pause for questions. In case there's any background noise or rustling papers or things like that, Phil might mute us all occasionally just to make sure that we don't pick up any extraneous noise. Microphones on these computers are really, really sensitive, and so sometimes they pick up noise that we don't want them to pick up, and that's why it's always a good idea to mute yourself unless you're speaking, okay? And I'll watch the gallery. We're going to watch chat, and we want to make sure we get a lot of questions answered today. So the first thing to understand is, what is this thing called a web browser? Okay, and I guess I'm drawing in purple today. Okay, so sometimes I draw in orange, sometimes I draw in purple. Okay, so a web browser is an application. It's a piece of software that has a job to do. Okay, its job is to display web pages on a device. And I say device because it could be a smartphone, a computer, a TV. You know, there are even refrigerators that have web browsers. I don't have one myself. Anybody have a refrigerator with a web browser, a smart refrigerator yet? Okay, they're coming, but I don't still understand what the value is of them. I suppose eventually we'll figure out a use. The confusing part about web browsers, or a confusing part about them, is that one browser is usually included on your computer or mobile device. Okay. Now, Microsoft includes one, Google includes one, and Apple includes one. Those are most of the big makers of devices. Windows makes the Windows 10 operating system, et cetera. And so web browsing is such a common daily activity we do on the internet. It's probably one of the things you do other than reading email. It's probably one of the things. I don't know. What do you think? Okay, so if you think you do web browsing more than email, raise your hand. Okay, if anybody think they do web browsing more than email? Okay, who thinks they do email more than web browsing? Okay, so a lot of people, we spend a lot of time in email. Okay, and so it's but you might be using your web browser to actually read your email as well. That's something where you're kind of doing both at once. But we use applications for doing, whenever we go shopping on Amazon, whenever we get set up to register for a class, whenever we do online banking, we are typically using a web browser. And its job is to display web pages. Now, as Jean Ann mentioned, browsers and search engines are two different things. And a browser is an application, right? Its job is to display a web page like Get Set Up or Apple or Microsoft. And that's what the web browser's job is to do. A search engine is a tool, usually a website, that finds something for you on the internet. And the two big ones are Google and Bing. Google is owned by the parent company. They changed their name to Alphabet, and Bing is owned by Microsoft. And if you typically use a Google Chrome browser, they make the Chrome browser, you'll typically use Google for search. If you use the Windows 10 built-in browser, you'll typically use Bing for search. Okay, so they're just resources that are available for you to use, whichever device you tend to use. And this is where it gets confusing. So searching is about finding things on the web. So when you go to google.com or bing.com, you're visiting a web page, and the purpose of that web page is to search the web for you. Any questions about that? About search with browse? Kind of like a book is something you read, but you use a library to find books. Okay, so it's, you might use a card catalog. The card catalog doesn't actually have the book in it, but it's a directory of books, right? But when you actually want to read something, you open up a book and open up the page to read it. Okay, so let's take a look at the next idea, web pages. There's a lot of technology behind web pages, but for our purposes, we want to know a few things that make it easier for us to use. Okay, web pages are files. They're computer files, just like a document or a picture or a photo. A web page exists on a computer somewhere out on the internet, and it's a file. okay, that contains information, text, graphics, images, maybe some forms you fill out. It contains all of that information. All web page files are made up of something called HTML. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, for those of you that care to know that. But the important thing about it is that it is an industry standard. The standard organization that controls it is called the World Wide Web Consortium. There is an organization made up of people like Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Mozilla, Netflix, governments, over 400 more participants. And they pay dues, they belong to this organization, and they set standards for the World Wide Web. Why do you need a standard? Well, in my networking class, I talk about electricity networks. Okay, if you go and buy a fan or a coffee maker or a lamp from a store, you have a pretty confident understanding that when you bring it home, you can plug it into an electrical outlet in the wall and it will operate, don't you? Right? Okay. You just know, oh, it's electric, it must work when I bring it home. That's because there are standards for the electrical system we use that put things out at 110 volts alternating current. We don't think about it much because most things just work, okay? And we don't really think about web pages that much because most of the time they just work. If you can enter a web page address in this box on your browser, like getsetup.io or amazon.com or something else, the web page pops up, doesn't it? And that's because all of these organizations participate in something called the World Wide Web Consortium to make sure that it all works together, which makes it usable for everybody else. It's kind of like the internal combustion engine in our cars. Pretty much all use regular or premium gasoline. So if you pull into a gas station, no matter what car you're driving, whether it's a Mazda or a Toyota or a Chevy or a Ford, you got a pretty good chance that when you put gas in it, it's going to work, right? Okay. And so this is what the web does for us electronically. It makes sure these standards are there for us. And it's behind the scenes, but they want to make it easier and easier for everything to work together so that everything does work together. So whether you're on a Windows computer or a Mac or an iPhone or that smart refrigerator, you can see a web page no matter what you're doing, right? And that's because it's all standardized. Any questions about that? Kind of an interesting organization. There's a lot of these industry standard organizations for technology. Anybody ever hear of the World Wide Web Consortium before? Ever? Okay, so something new you learned today. You can impress your friends and family by saying, oh, did you know that the World Wide Web Consortium sets the standards for HTML? You throw that sentence off and your friends and family are going to be really impressed. They'll start asking you technical questions though, so you got to be careful. Okay. These are the major web browsers, okay? And you've probably heard of these. Chrome, Edge, Safari, maybe you've heard of Firefox too, okay? And these make up like 95% of all web browsers used by people. Chrome is made by Google. Edge is made by Microsoft. Safari is made by Apple. Firefox is not made by a company, it's made by an organization, so it's called open source, but you might have heard of it. It's called Mozilla, and I'm getting better at writing with my mouse, so it's actually readable most of the time now. Okay. Google makes the Chrome operating system, and when you buy a Chromebook, you're going to get Google's Chrome web browser. Or when you buy an Android phone or a tablet, you're going to get the Chrome web browser. Microsoft supplies Edge with Windows 10, and Apple supplies Safari. And who has iPhones? Anybody have iPhones? Okay, so I don't know whether you
Yes,
use,
I do.
yeah. I don't know whether you use Safari, which is the built-in browser, but you
That's the
can,
one I use.
that's the one you use, right?
Uh-huh.
So, and you can use different types of browsers with these. Now, this is who makes the big ones and what they come with. Okay. Because of all these standards, a lot of web browsers do a lot of things. Now, I'm going to give you a poll in just a second because I want to get some feedback on things. This is to help you understand web browsing today, but if you were looking at a how-to class and how to use web browsers, think about that in the back of your mind. I'm going to give you a poll. Okay, so if we look at web browsing tools, they all do a couple of things. They all have this search and address field. It's one field that does both, lets you enter an address for a web page and lets you type in a word and will search for you. The web browser is linked to a search tool. Okay, so so that most web browsers have this ability to do a search from this address field. So it's a multi-purpose tool. It will do both. You can type in a web address or you can type in a word and it will search. So it's connected to a search engine. And that's why some people are confused about, well, what's a web browser and what's a search engine? You can search from your web browser by typing in a word or a phrase in this field, and it's automatically connected to a search engine and will display results. They all have them. Okay, so all of them have that. All of them have something called tabs. All of them have something called bookmarks and favorites. Favorites is Microsoft's word for bookmarks. All of them have something called reading mode. All of them have something that gives you the ability to use private browsing, and all of them have tools for saving passwords. I don't know, has anybody ever taken Wade's class on password lockers? Robert, you took it. It was good. I recommend it. I use a password locker myself. It's a tool for keeping track of passwords. And so they're really useful. If you haven't taken that class, I'd recommend it. Okay, so these are some common web browser tools that exist in all web browsers. As I mentioned, this search and address field you see at the top of a web browser, it actually can conduct a search if you type in a word, or you can type in a web address like getsetup.io or apple.com or microsoft.com, and you can go directly to that web page if you want to. And so they all have that function. They all do exactly the same way, but they sometimes use a different search tool. Microsoft's Edge browser will take you to Bing. Google's Chrome browser will take you to Google. And anybody want to guess what Apple's takes you to? You don't have to guess if you don't want to. I'll tell you the answer, but you might not realize this, but Apple's search or tool, when you type in a search in Safari, it actually uses Google's search engine. Apple does not make a search engine, and Google pays Apple to make Google the search engine when you use Safari. So Apple makes money by when people type in, a search tool. Now there are settings where you can change those things. That's beyond this class, but that's what they come how they work out of the box. So Safari is going to do a Google search, Edge is going to do a Bing search, and Chrome is going to do a Google search. Okay. They all do that. Okay. Tabs. They all have tabs. I actually have a tab open on mine. I'm showing you my slides in a tab, but I have another tab open for Get Setup. And if I wanted to switch from this tab to this tab while I'm using my browser, I just click. Okay. And I go to a different view of the web. I go to a different website. So you can add more tabs by clicking on the plus. It opens up a blank tab. So if I wanted to search or go to Google, I could go to Google right away. And so you can keep all of these tabs open and just move between different pages you have visible on the web whenever you want to. They all do that. All the web browsers do that. They all use something called bookmarks, okay? And bookmarks are the tool that help you find a web page more easily. Just like in a book, you might use a bookmark to find a page that you want to go back to. Bookmarks serve the same purpose on a web browser. You visited Get Set Up and you want to go back to it frequently. Well, you can keep it open as a tab, but if you close your browser and you want to get it back again, how do you get to it? Well, bookmarks serve that function. Chrome and Edge have a feature where you can star a page that you're visiting. In the right of this address field here, you'll see a little star up here. I didn't draw that very well. Let me undo that and draw a better circle. That little star, if you click on that, it saves it in your bookmarks. And if you have a menu on the top of your screen it says bookmarks, you'll be able to view them. Safari works a little bit differently. In Safari, to add a page as a bookmark, you would click on the share icon in the Safari web browser. And then when you want to find it on your web desktop, you would use this little sidebar tool and it'll display the bookmarks there. So I'm gonna ask you to give me some feedback on something right now, if you don't mind. I'm gonna try. Anybody ever filled out a poll on Zoom when you've been in a meeting? Okay, great. Well, they're nothing fancy, but I'm going to just ask you a couple of questions here. And we just started doing these classes. You can actually answer more than one answer in number one. Number two is a yes or no question, okay? And when as you view the questions and you click on the answers, I'll share the poll with you while I have a drink, after I have a drink of water here. So I just want to get an idea if you have any requests for a more advanced class or something that we do a little bit more that would help you out and try and get an idea, because I put together classes, Wade, other people, all the guides put together class ideas, but if we know people ask for a lot of things, we can focus on those. So this helps out a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer a few of these. We got 8 out of 13. We'll get a little bit more answered here. And if you have any questions, just let me know if you have a question about something. I think technology is kind of a vocabulary we have to learn. It's not only learning how to do something, it's learning what in the world are these things. Because like you say, like Jean Ann mentioned earlier, and some other people, they'll throw out technology terms and you wonder what in the world they really mean and what are they talking about. Okay. Right, we've got almost everyone here, so we're getting pretty close. Okay, and it doesn't have to be 100%. If you don't want to answer, it's not required. I just wanted to get some feedback on browsers and what we should do. And I don't think too many of you will be surprised at the results, but you never know. You never know. Okay. Okay, so we've got 11 out of 13 people that answered. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and then I'm going to share the results with you, and we can see. Okay, can you see the results of the poll on your screen right now? You should be able to. Okay, so Google Chrome is probably what most people use on their desktops. They're pretty familiar with Chrome. A lot of people use Chrome. It works virtually the same way on Windows and Macs. It's pretty similar. Safari for Mac and iPhones. It's mostly used by people that own Mac and iPhones, but I think if people own an iPhone, lots of times they'll just use Safari because it's built in, or Edge because it's built in. So I think we'll look at Chrome maybe. And then it sounds like some people are interested in some things that explain technology terms too. So thanks for the feedback. I'm going to download my results here and stop sharing. Thanks for participating. I really appreciate that. Okay, so let me go. Any questions about that? Any surprises, that
No.
you had about the poll, questions in the poll? Yeah, Robert.
I use Chrome on my Mac because I'm told that it's faster than Safari. Haven't checked that out. Maybe you can speak to that, whether Chrome is indeed faster or what the benefit would be. Right.
It depends on who you ask. Okay, if you ask Google or pretty much any loyal Chrome user, they'll tell you Chrome is faster on a Mac. If you ask Apple or any Safari user, they'll tell you Safari is faster on a Mac. So believe it or not, they all pretty much perform about the same because they have to follow all these standards, right? And so there's not a lot of differences between these browsers, surprisingly. Okay, so if we look at mobile browsers, this is a screenshots I took on my iPhone. I have an iPhone, not an Android, but it would look pretty similar. And these are 3 views of the Get Set Up web page on my mobile device. Okay, one of them is Chrome. One of them was viewed with Safari, and the other one was viewed with Edge. And a couple of things are pretty similar. There's that search and address bar that's in all of them, right? And the way the web page looks, is this box right here. There's one difference because I didn't get to it fast enough. This one has a different class than these two, but the format, the text size, the need help, the calendar, the register button, the view schedule, they're all pretty much the same across all the browsers, or all the different browsers, aren't they? So that's part of what the standards do, is it makes sure that when you view a web page on Safari or Chrome or Edge or Firefox or whatever, that web page is gonna look the same across everything. And it's going to help you, use it depending on which one you use. Now, what's a little bit different is the icons at the bottom here. So these icons are a little bit different. between the different browsers. This one has they all have back and forward arrows pretty much at the left. So that's the same. They have a plus button here on this one. And this one doesn't have a plus button. And this one doesn't have a plus button. So some of the navigation tools to actually use the browser are a little different from one to the other. Now, this is kind of the start of thinking of yourself as a systems integrator. A systems integrator is a person in the information and technology field that makes technology from one company work with technology from another company. So if you were, say, IBM and you wanted to make, and somebody had a Hewlett Packard computer and they wanted to make it work with IBM's, they might have to hire somebody called a systems integrator to make sure things work together. You have a job as a technology user called a systems integrator. You're the systems integrator for yourself. Because if you're using, say, a Mac with Chrome, you're using technology from two different companies, aren't you? Right? So if you're using Safari on an iPhone and a Windows 10 desktop with Edge, you're using two different technologies, aren't you? So life to me is about trying to make the technology work for you instead of you having to work for the technology. And by simplifying the choices and the different technologies you use, you can make your life a little bit easier. So believe it or not, Chrome, Safari, and Edge, with the exception of Safari, Chrome and Edge are available on virtually any device you might want to use. Safari pretty much only works on Apple. So, people that have Apple devices, phones, Macs, tablets, they tend to gravitate towards Safari more, but only because Apple puts in some interesting tools that make it easier and to save things across them, like those bookmarks and other things that you can save across them. But if you use Chrome on two different devices, you could save your bookmarks on Chrome and they would be saved for you to use. So using the same browser across different technologies help. We'll talk a little bit more about that so that becomes clearer to you if you're confused by it. Now, I don't want you to be confused. Okay, so all web browsers have a security feature. The World Wide Web Consortium, that standards body, created a type of website technology that is called HTTPS. The S stands for security. Whenever you see a web page, you typically won't see the HTTP anymore in your web browser, but you will see a small lock icon. Okay? And that lock icon means that the web page is secure. That means that any information that you send from your computer to the website is encrypted and virtually impossible for anybody to hack into. It would take all the computers in the world about 10 years to hack into that information. So obviously for banking websites, for sites where you use, want to make sure your passwords don't get passed along, shopping websites. But now Google actually ranks secure websites higher in search results, and Bing does as well. So that if you look at virtually every major website that's out in the world, if we look at Get Set Up, I don't even have to move my drawing. There's the secure icon. If I go to Google, there's that lock. Okay, so it just is becoming more and more common. But that lock means that the information is encrypted. It's like the what was the code that the Germans used in World War II? The Enigma machine, right? I don't know if you've heard of that. The Enigma machine. They used this code machine that coded things to send information from the German high command to the submarines, and it was really devastating to the Allies. There's a couple of movies that have been made about it, some PBS specials, other things, and the messages were encrypted with a code. And so even if we could listen to the radio signals, we didn't know what they meant until it was cracked by a scientist called Turing, Turing. And he developed, there was a movie made about that that was really good. And so that gives you that capability for, that's security, okay? Privacy is a little bit different issue. Privacy has to do with cookies, okay? A cookie is a piece of information, just like numbers and letters, about 10 digits roughly, and it identifies your web browser. It doesn't identify you specifically. It just says, oh, this is web browser, 947,312, and it's coming back to visit a website. And I want to give that web browser the ability to automatically log in whenever it visits the website. So I'm going to use that cookie, and I'm going to say, okay, got a cookie, and I know who that web browser belongs to. Okay, I don't know the person, I just know it belongs to a specific computer. But cookies are used for tracking purposes. They're used by advertisers. And so when you visit websites and they say, this website uses cookies, in some states it's required that they tell you, in others it's not. They will, you accept cookies and you give them the ability to track what you do on the web, and they will display ads that are appropriate to that. We are giving the web, the internet, a lot of information about what we do and where we do it when we, because it's mostly free, right? Any questions about cookies and encryption?
This is Jean.
Yes.
I think if I recollect, there is a way to delete cookies once they've come up on a website, or is there some way to do that? I'm always a little bit ambivalent about cookies and what they don't do and what they do. Any feedback on that?
A cookie is a piece of tracking information. It doesn't tell anybody who you are specifically except the website that gave it to you. So if a website gives you a cookie, it's kind of like a valet parking receipt. I know what your car is based on your ticket that you gave us, or a coat rack. I know what your coat is, but I may not know anything about you or who you are, other than I know this is your coat because you're giving me a ticket to pick it up. And that's kind of the level of information that a cookie has about you. There are tools in web browsers that'll let you delete all of your cookies, and the private browsing mode on Google, if you go, sorry about that, my mouse went there. On Google, the 3 dots in the upper right give you the ability to open up what is called an incognito window, which means you won't be tracked, but it's not the standard setting for Google. You always have to access it each time you want to use it. But you can delete your cookies, but every time you visit a website, advertising so prevalent on the internet, that's how it supports itself, that pretty much anytime you visit a website, that's going to install a cookie in your browser right away. We'll talk a little bit about.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure. Okay, so Google, by the way, you might see a little icon. It's tiny, I know, I'm sorry. But you might see a picture of me here in the upper right-hand corner of my Google browser. Whenever you are using Chrome and you have a Google account, like a Gmail account, or and you automatically are logged in to your Google account when you use Chrome. And so whenever you see this picture of yourself in the Chrome browser, Google not only knows it's your web browser with a cookie, they know it's you because you are logged into your Google account. So they're able to track your behavior as a person, not just as a web browser. So Google tends to have privacy issues around, that, and if that's a concern for you, just be aware of that whenever you're using Chrome, you are logged in to Google, unless you log out. So then we have to figure out this question. Okay, the major web browsers, part 2. Chrome pretty much works on everything. Google's a big company. They're really, really active in setting standards for the web. They actually sell a piece of Chrome to Microsoft. And Microsoft uses Chrome technology in their Edge browser, as does Safari. Okay, so there's a little bit of trading back and forth between these companies sometimes. So Edge works on almost everything except a Chromebook. Okay, you can download Edge for an Apple Mac or an Android phone, works fine. Safari pretty much only works on Apple devices. You can't get it on Windows, you can't get it on Android, you can't get it on Chromebooks. And Firefox is made by Mozilla. It works across everything as well. If you prefer not to use a web browser owned by a company, but owned by a nonprofit organization, you can use that. So if you have some of these particular technologies, what are some ways to make your life a little bit simpler? Okay, well, these are suggestions, not absolute laws, or things that, oh, I got to go make this change, right? Okay, since the World Wide Web Consortium kind of controls the standards, all web browsers are going to do similar things for you. They will synchronize things like your bookmarks across different devices. They'll synchronize things like reading lists, and they'll synchronize things like passwords. They all perform about the same, and they all have a few odds and ends features. Like if you're a big Google user of Google Apps, it's easier when you're in the Chrome browser, but you can get to all your apps regardless of what browser you use. If you're on an iPhone, iPad, and Mac, if you're an Apple user, all Apple devices, Safari does offer some really nice tools that make it easier for people to move from iPhones and iPads and Mac. Like it will save all your bookmarks and synchronize them in iCloud, which is Apple's cloud. But when you start mixing technology, okay, say you use Windows 10 and you have an Android phone. Well, you can't use Safari, but it kind of depends. Do you use Google more or do you use Windows 10 more? If you use Windows 10 more, then the Edge browser does give you some nice features in Windows, and you can download it to work on your Android device. If you're using iPhones and iPads and Windows, well, you can't use Safari on Windows 10, so your choices are Chrome or Edge. And again, it's more a matter of, are you more into using Google tools or more into using Microsoft tools? Okay. Now, in case what Apple doesn't make Safari work on Windows 10, so this doesn't exist. Okay, this can't be done. And the reason is that Apple's in the business to sell products. Okay, and so they know most people when they buy an Apple product will typically buy an iPhone or maybe an iPad. But if they have a Windows 10 computer, people start scratching their head with things like, gee, how do I get my pictures from my iPhone to my Windows 10 computer, right? And Apple's got a couple of solutions. They do make iCloud that works on Windows 10, but they would much rather you look at buying a Mac. That would be their preferred solution for you. I mean, that helps their stockholders, right? If you're an Android and Mac user, probably Chrome is going to be the best solution for you. Like I say, these are what I've observed people using. I am different from most people in that I do use all three of them. I do have Windows, I do have iPhones and iPads. I have one Android device. I'll be honest, I'm not that big an Android user, but it'll do the job for you if you want. But these are just suggestions for choosing. And I'm going to send you in the email links to help and support sites for all of these web browsers. But it's easier, like if you're keeping bookmarks on Chrome on one device and Edge on another, they don't synchronize, and so it's better. I recommend people just pick one and go with it. It's the right way to go. Okay, so let me pause for some Q&A here because this is all about web browsers. Now you probably have questions about these web browsers and what they do, don't you? Let me take a sip of water too. Okay, so who's thinking of making a switch to anything different as a result of anything they learned today? Anybody thinking of changing anything?
Yeah.
Robert, go ahead. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking about going back to Safari on my iPhone and across all my Apple products.
Are you an Apple? Is everything you have Apple? You've got a Mac,
Yes.
an iPhone, iPad, yeah.
Everything I have I have an Apple platform. I got frustrated with Microsoft, probably 10 years ago because it was all so slow and it kept having to update everything all the time. When our kids said, go to Apple, you like it better. So we went to Apple and have been
It's a
using
learning
this.
curve.
But I'm frustrated using Chrome, Google, whenever I Google anything, because we get all these ads following anytime you go anything else. So I really wanted to know what you know about something like Duckduckgo that doesn't sell your links or your cookies to other people so that you don't get all those ads.
Well, you will get ads, okay? DuckDuckGo and others that are out there, they're supported by advertising. What they don't do is they don't track you. They don't track your history. So what Robert's referring to is a search engine site called DuckDuckGo, and it's used by a lot of people that just don't want their search history recorded. Now, if you are logged into your Google Chrome browser with your Google account, even if you use DuckDuckGo, they're going to know, Google will know where you go. Okay. But Apple Safari does give you the ability to change your search engine. So if you'd rather not use Google search, you can change it to DuckDuckGo. Actually, they let you do that. But yeah, it's the other advantage of if you have all Mac or Windows or something is that if you have Apple products, Apple supports Safari. Okay, so if you ever had to call Apple for technical support on a Safari question, you can. They will help you out with that. Windows includes Microsoft Edge, but unless you subscribe to Microsoft 365, you don't get technical support on Edge from Microsoft. So they include it with their 365 subscription. And Google's starting that up as well for, I think, $1.99 a month. You can get additional storage with Google, and they support you with Gmail and some other app support questions too. So they're all kind of getting into the support business more like Apple. They're all kind of following Apple's lead because that's what people want. Anybody else thinking of making a change? I think somebody else said they learned something today that might cause them to look at doing something a little bit different. And if you feel comfortable doing what you're doing now, that's okay too, because when you're doing things now, it's really helpful to understand, hey, what I'm doing is really the best thing for me. Okay. So it sounds like, people that are using Chrome, and actually there's a lot of similarities between Safari and Chrome. It's just some of the icons are different. But it sounds like some people might like to see a class on how to use Chrome better, okay, and make sure it works better for them. And it will help you with any browser, whether you're using Safari or Edge, or even Mozilla. But there are some specifics to your Google account with Chrome. But thank you for participating in the poll. That helps out a lot. Okay, so let's kind of review, and then we'll think of, take some more questions if we have time. We talked about how web browsers work. Chrome, Edge, and Safari all do a lot of things that are really, really similar to each other. They just might have different buttons or icons for doing those things, but they all do them. We talked about encryption and secure websites and cookies, and some tips on choosing the best browser for you. You can download, Chrome on almost anything. You can download Edge. I've downloaded it onto my iPhone. And so there's all kinds, you can download Chrome or Edge, but using one gets you more comfortable. The thing with learning technology that I found is that if you become familiar with one way of doing things, it's easier to just continue doing that. Changing technologies is a lot of work. Okay, and so I'm sure that when you started using Zoom, if you weren't using it before, a lot of our COVID lockdowns, and you started using Zoom, there was a learning curve for you. All of a sudden, we're using this video conferencing tool, but as you got better at it, you got more comfortable with it. But if I, said, hey, tomorrow you got to start using some other, tool, it would be a learning curve for you. And so avoiding learning curves is something I recommend. It's kind of like ballroom dancing. If you learn salsa and then somebody says, oh, I want to dance waltz, it's all different moves, right? It's all different moves. And so it really becomes a challenge. Okay, so let's go. Let me wrap a few things up here. There are some great class. Well, thank you, Jean-Ann. Appreciate that. Jean-Ann posted a comment in chat. Thank you very much. Zoom, beginning, advanced, others. The cloud classes, if you're, Microsoft user, OneDrive's great. Google Drive, iCloud. I use them all. Again, I'm a little bit abnormal that way, but that's because technology to me is a hobby, kind of like crafting and pottery and quilting. Those are different hobbies for people. Computers are my hobby. A couple of classes, PowerPoint, basics. We kind of changed this. It's PowerPoint basics, but we always go through some advanced tools. If you're ever making a presentation to anybody, it's a great way to use it. There's actually a free web version, but we talk about the Microsoft 365. Thanks for your feedback on the poll. I was thinking of a class this morning on my walk about, I wonder if people would like to know how to tell how fast their computer is and figure out a way to measure their PC's performance. You know, this is what I do on my walks is I think of things like that. So
That's interesting.
yeah, it is. And so first of all, you know, it's I like, okay, how do I think about that? But I think I'll go to start working on the Chrome class. I'll propose one to Wade. Wade kind of helps us keep track of all the technology classes. You're going to get notes with links to all of the web browsers that I mentioned. So support sites, they all have great support sites on the web. If you want to recommend this class to a friend, whether they're a member of Get Set Up or not, you know, there's a tool in the class notes to just click on a link and you can post it on Facebook or email. We'll get some recommendations for some other classes you'll find and you'll have a link to feedback. So thank you for all the feedback that you provided for all of our guides. We all really appreciate that. And when you register for classes now, there's a new feature in Get Set Up where you can actually tell friends about the class when you register, both in the mobile app and there's one of our guides, Marv, actually teaches a class on orientation to Get Set Up. And then thanks to Phil, our teaching assistant, give him a wave, and you know he helped make sure that nobody had any technical difficulties and started the recording on time, which I often forget to do. So thank you. But your guides are able to host interest groups. If you have a particular interest, send an email to help@getsetup.io, and we provide technical support, so it's not like you have to know Zoom or anything like that. So you might have participated in some of those already. And obviously, if you're interested in a session recording, feel free to request one. So anybody have any questions before we wrap up and close out our morning? I'm actually going to be doing 2 classes later today as well. So appreciate if I see you again, say hi, Bob. Okay. And we'll take care of that. So it's a lot of fun teaching people. I hope. Who learned something new?
I
you
did.
learn
I did.
something? All right.
I
Oh,
did.
all right. Then we all learned something.
I did.
All right.
I
Thanks.
sure
Great.
did.
Thank you. Thank you all, everybody, and appreciate. We'll look forward maybe to a class on Chrome, and then maybe some other browser tools as well. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay,
every-
sounds good.
Okay.
take comment.
Bye.
Bye.
See you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Everybody.
Good
Bye-bye.
afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.